Hi, good evening. It's really lovely to be doing a live event again. I think we all got a bit fed up of Zoom things, didn't we? Yes. It's just nice to see one another in the flesh again. Yeah, I was really lucky in writing this. The Daiwa Foundation have been hugely supportive and gave me a grant so that I could return to Japan and do some extra research. And then Arts Council England supported me in the writing. So, can you hear me well enough at the back? Yeah? Super. Okay. So, Japan Stories I wrote because I wanted to explore quite a variety of characters, male, female, different ages, and from vastly different backgrounds. So I think that's largely how we increase our empathy for one another, is through literature. By experiencing quite different lives to our own. But of course, in doing that, we also find similarities. I'm going to read an especially short one to begin with. He's quite a naughty and eccentric man. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to Ryo. He's an older Japanese man who lives up in the mountains. This is my ukiyo-e museum. Welcome. You are welcome to pay me 500 yen. Then you may enter quietly and look around the room. So many rare prints. It's dark, but you understand that I have to control the light. I have to protect the colors. When I don't want you in here anymore, I will tell you to leave. I should be retired and resting officially, so I have the luxury of opening and closing whenever I like. I choose my own hours, and I don't need the money. Since this is the case, then why charge at all? It is to make you consider seriously if you wish to inconvenience me with your visit. And if your desire to view the prints is sufficient, you must deliberate this by yourself. I will not get involved. No children and no smoking. Of course, no eating, no drinking, definitely no dogs. Please wear a mask at all times. Don't touch anything. I don't know where you've been. And you may not use my toilet. This is my private home. It's a museum and my home. It's true that some people have accused me of tricking them. They say there is nothing in the museum, no prints at all, just a room with blank walls painted black. That all I aim to do is swindle, cheat visitors out of their money and use it for drink. But some people don't know well enough how to see, how to appreciate this art. It is of a higher order. If they wish to hide their ignorance and drape it in accusations, it's up to them. Let it be. John Lennon. I just do that. I let it be. They are fools, but I cannot tell them so. People shouldn't bother me. Let it be. That's all I can tell you. Okay? Thank you. Okay, I just want to share something. Sometimes we stop and think, what is the purpose of creating any art, and literature in particular in my case? There's this fabulous book by David Palumo-Louis, who is a professor and director of comparative literature at Stanford. The Deliverance of Others. I just wanted to read a short paragraph where he's quoted one of my favourite authors. So, the tradition of regarding literature as a particularly powerful vehicle for conveying the sense of another's life, which is what I think we're trying to do. So one of the most famous statements on the matter comes from George Eliot's review essay from 1895. The greatest benefit we owe to the artist, whether painter, poet, or novelist, is the extension of our sympathies. Appeals founded upon generalizations and statistics require a sympathy ready-made, a moral sentiment already in activity. But a picture of human life, such as a great artist can give, surprises even the trivial and the selfish into that attention to what is apart from themselves, which may be called the nearest thing to life. It is a mode of amplifying experience and extending our contact with our fellow men beyond the bounds of our personal lot. And I just wanted to share that because, some people ask why you might want to write about people from another culture, vastly different culture. And I think, particularly in the current climate of huge divisions, fiction is one of the ways of bridging those gaps. We can find similarities and differences. We can learn something, but always it increases our empathy. Anyway, the other part about literature is that it's just jolly good fun sometimes. I promise you I'm going to read the David Bowie story, but I thought I would read it last. And I'm afraid you're going to have to sing, so prepare yourselves. Everybody knows Heroes, don't they, by David Bowie? Okay. So I don't know how many of you may have seen the amazing film The Lost Daughter with Olivia Colman recently. But one of the reasons it really struck me was because I got to view a woman from my own culture represented in a way I'm not used to seeing women represented. And so without giving anything away, I would say, please, everybody try and see that, despite the fact that it's not Japan related. But it's related to my talk in the sense that I want to try and share some characters who are less typical in my Japanese experience. Okay. I'm going to introduce you to Misaki, a slightly more unusual Japanese female. It started during the pandemic, I think, this change in me. Yes, it did. Though in some ways the pandemic made no difference at all to the event. Things alter a person's mind, but it truly might have gone like this anyway. For me, maybe COVID-19 was just the final necessary impetus for what I thought of as gotta make shit happen. Anyway, the pandemic, that's when this took place. I was quite new to the area. It was pretty and rural. My parents were in Tokyo, professionals, lawyer, dentist, essential but ugly professions. I quit my own studies in dentistry, afraid I'd lose my mind, my soul. Maybe I'd open a cafe out here. I had money and access to money and access to this and that if I wanted to continue my existence as an asshole, taking and taking. But I had high hopes I could be better than that. A better person. Not sure how to judge that, to be honest, and the way things turned out. I took over a small dwelling with a meagre patch of land. I watched and learned from neighbours, distantly took advice, masked of course. I learned how to grow stuff, fix stuff, and it seemed I was rather handy at both. Being outside felt like a good fit. The air, the soil, the partial isolation, or at least the distance afforded the non-dental from the gaping mouths of others. People didn't take too badly to the girl moved up from the city, it seemed. At first, in any case. I was always quizzed and criticised the hell out of for taking up dentistry studies, a man's profession. Nursing was more acceptable. And I am so past that bullshit. Fuck acceptable. I had a neighbour, an older man, and he seemed to live alone. Not friendly at all, but I found that amusing. I like people who don't really need other people. That emotional self-sufficiency is not far from me. Sometimes I like people, but whether or not I need them is still up for question. I mean, I can do it, socializing, all the normal interaction, but it feels like an act. The act of being human. An act of being human, approximating. After all, despite not going the whole way, who the hell even goes into dentistry? There's something dark about it. I think I was cautious about that, being dark, perhaps becoming more dark, forever in a mask, tools to hand, and the drilling. Oh my, I was so wise. I left that crap behind me. Out here, closer to the natural world, I might study plant life, indigenous species, all kinds of creatures. And perhaps I would get a telescope. The sky was clearer up here in the mountains. What faraway stars might I see now? I would build a tower for this too. Observation, nice plan. When you are eccentric, you don't know it. People say it of you, very rarely to you, and it's akin to being ill in the head, I've heard, if you're a woman. That's how I heard my old man neighbour describing me one afternoon. Not COVID-19, she's just sick in the head. Well, there we are, I thought. I shrugged and carried on digging. I would make some good and sturdy base for the observation tower. It might need to be concrete. That would be a first for me if that was the case, but I was up for it. Much to consider. An old woman brought out some tea and laughed with me at my great ambition. I told her she was welcome to come up and try it out when I had completed the build. She blushed and chortled and withdrew. People, I can't read them, but anyhow. There seemed to be a lot of stray animals in the area, moved in when they were abandoned at the start and during the pandemic. That would be my guess. But my guess is usually off. People often say that. The tower went through various incarnations. At first people didn't want to help, but when they saw how rickety the structure was, they came good. I'd never built big before, just small cupboards and that type of thing. Just learning on the hoof, and always quite slowly. I was a careful worker. Anyway, the tower needed making safe. And so with the neighbours' reluctant help, it got made. I needed distance, pandemic or no. That's why I was there. But the tower needed to come into being, and absolutely right then, because no, I couldn't be patient and wait until the disease had passed. What the hell? This entire project was in order to keep my sanity. I had to get it made. It was a good feeling to eat the vegetables I had grown myself. I liked meat, but was trying to go vegetarian. Not sure it was wise. I got thin. Maybe I wasn't doing it right. The old man neighbour spied on me quite a lot. Perhaps I imagined some portion of that. Shadows, the shadows of something else or someone else. I tried to figure it in a way that didn't disturb me. I wanted to see the stars in the distance. He wanted to observe a young person's endeavours, that type of thing, nothing more. It was my hope that he was impressed by my labours. I laughed out loud at that, embarrassed. For sure there was little to admire in my craft work and building, but shit, I was giving it my best shot. In the evenings, I studied about the stars, readying myself. I had cut contact with my family by now. They didn't get me at all. Well, I had little need of being understood, but nonetheless I was grateful that they still wanted to fund me. If I was any way decent, I wouldn't accept their money. Well, that's still another thing I have to work on. Emotions and a conscience seemed hard for someone like me to conceive of. I glibly wondered whether they were things I could download someplace. I know I am rude. Always hard for the world to accept character imperfections in women. The bar is set too high, I tell you, too fucking well high, so screw it all. So little is expected of men by comparison. That's why some of them murder, isn't it? Not many women do that. Actually, I don't know. How would I know? It's just what I think, just as an ordinary member of society. This is what happens when I don't keep busy. I just start ruminating, ruminate. All of it's useful, no grand conclusions. So back to work in the tower. Should I paint it? A step too far? It could be rather cheerful looking out here in, say, yellow or orange, but perhaps the natural colour of the wood is enough in green surroundings. Tiny frogs had gathered around my feet whilst I stood there musing. A real troop, and when I lifted my foot they moved with me. I stepped again and this continued. What were they doing? No matter. It felt strangely comforting, and I had no idea that I was in need of comfort. I shrugged my shoulders. I liked the frogs a lot. And so the tower came into being. If I had been one for celebrations, I suppose I'd have opened some special alcohol. But I never drank and I didn't know what else to do. That was fine. When I got to see the stars, that would be my celebration. As I climbed up slowly and mindful of my footing, I heard a rustling someplace behind me. I looked over my shoulder but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I carried on, pushing a moment to check my feet and catching my breath. The wind was up. The structure seemed to creak, but my weight couldn't be too much. Of late I was nothing but bone. I was caused to look down. Never wise when climbing, and I didn't know what drew me to do it. But when I did, there he was, the old man neighbour gripping the bottom of one of the struts. Never a word between us. But now he seemed to want to help, as though holding the ladder for a friend. There was truly no need. The structure, I was confident, was really quite fine. Of course it was narrow, the proportions modest. It was a tower just for one. But it did not require a grown adult to steady it. Kind as it seemed. I stemmed my natural urge to read it as criticism of my ability to construct such a thing. But no, he was genuinely worried for my safety. He was simply overcautious. I tilted my head as a means of thanking him, but I doubted he would hear if I called out. Unmasked, he seemed to move his mouth, but nothing, no idea what he said. "Take care," was my guess. The tower seemed to give a little, and I sensed I needed to compensate and adjust my position. When you're about to fall, everything slows down. I read about this absently at university. Why or how the brain takes us through a traumatic event in slow motion. Something about allowing us a sense of extra time to take in the details, thus possibly allowing another part of the brain to find a nice solution. Is that what I read? I may have invented it as my own sweet myth to help me out right about now. As I fall, I sense my back arching. I become a crescent moon. Still, everything is in slow-mo. The wind travels past me in straight lines. I peer up, trying to make myself believe I see faraway stars with my bare eyes. The old man is there. What has he done? I landed with a thud. I felt it through my torso. My neck had twisted. I was gone. The old man neighbor took up his axe. He hacked off my feet, left the rest of me where I lay. He walks, excuse me. He walked some distance, my feet in his hands. On a hill, he dug 2 shallow grooves, placed a foot in each. He placed a wooden sign right by them. Women must keep their feet on the ground. Since then, I spend my time up here with the stars. I visit the old man neighbor on the hour, every hour, as my ghost. I am his dentist. He must have his teeth pulled. All are rotten. Over and again, I am a dentist, his dentist, not entirely trained. That was dark, wasn't it? Apologies. Okay, how are you doing? Are you okay? Can you manage? Yeah? Okay, how are we doing for time? Okay, let's do, are you ready to do David Bowie? Okay. If you can, this is actually slightly based on a real person. A friend of mine's husband went through quite a heavy kind of breakdown, imagining that he was David Bowie. So that was very painful for everybody. But so I took the idea from that, and I gave it to a character that I created and gave him a different kind of story. And also, I wonder if this is slightly sharing a Japanese character that we're less used to seeing. Okay. So the very last part of it requires you to sing And We Can Be Heroes just for one day. Try. I will love you if you can do that. Otherwise, you'll have to suffer me singing it on my own, which might also be fun and embarrassing. Okay, can you hear me well enough?
Yes.
I should also mention I have the most amazing award-winning manga artist friend in Japan, NAMIKO. And she illustrated this story so perfectly, with a young man sitting down, suffering, and a huge mask of David Bowie's face. So, okay, here we go. This is called I'm Not David Bowie. Me neither. Okay. So this is a young Japanese guy. I am not David Bowie. That's how it is. I am not. And it feels strange, to be honest. You can be me. You can be me. He said that in Heroes. He said it over and over, and every time I listen, I believed it just a little bit more. And you can be me. That's what I heard. What I heard him say over and over to me, and only to me, during the most difficult time in my life. And I needed it. I would close my eyes and sway. And you can be me, would wash over me and dive into me. It gave me strength you can't imagine. His words were beautiful, brilliant, and so was he. Beautiful, brilliant. A warmth like no other. Imagine that he would share himself, even with someone as hopeless as me. Simple, such a simple man. Inadequate, you might say. You might say wanting in every single way. In the darkness, I would sway, and Bowie, your arms were wrapped around me like lovers. And I had no idea how. How does someone be a lover? But you said to me, like lovers do. And so it was real and fantastic. And it was warm. Yes. And I thought it was this hugging kind of thing that I cannot do at all. I sometimes put a cover around my shoulders and imagined it was you. I wanted you to hold me, and imagined that you did. I wanted to be you, and so it was. Starman, waiting. I shiver and then feel heat. I hear you in the sky. What happens to my body? Sweat, tears, joy. You always bring me such tremendous joy, even in the fog of the most pathetic, most life-depleted sorrow. I emerge like a river on the tatami, and you hold me loud. And damn all the neighbors anymore. I need this, I need this. But look at me. I hesitate to turn the music up. My fingers won't allow such a move. I cannot disturb the world. I seep into the ground. I must still myself. If I died, it could be better. I would leave no trace, no mess behind me. Just rest in the soil and become part of it. Harm nothing, cause no bother. Let me slip away as though in water. I met Shu through a dating app. I had joined a few in the past, tentatively, of course. Dating is not really for me. Meeting strangers is really not. Huge aversion to meeting people for the first time, and complete strangers are way off the edge. But a friend gently encouraged me. Some minor contact via the app and reading some details about the women meant they were not entirely strangers. That's a lie. A well-intentioned lie. Nonetheless, a lie. And understand this. My reluctance to date was largely, if not wholly, related to the loss of my very first girlfriend. My only girlfriend. She was so fragile, and I failed to recognize the absolute degree of this and her vulnerability. We are that, aren't we? Fragile, vulnerable. No one so whole, so resilient that they cannot be eroded. We can slip away gradually or with lightning speed, but it's all too much. She starved herself and I could not save her, always making small plates of food and hoping that I would not overwhelm her. Persimmon, sesame tofu, eel, a little plain rice. No, and I cannot speak more. After she passed away, I wanted to understand what she had gone through, what it had felt like to grow so thin. What happened to the mind? I needed to experience it to get close to her in the way that I had failed to do when she was alive. Then I would know what the mind sensed in that state, how she had felt and perceived things. I had neighbours around me, but I had never really got to know them. They must have known that I passed away, but I kept my sorrow private. I was certainly never noticed me, and as my weight fell, I felt myself invisible, though inside I was quite something else. I painted my face and stitched together fabrics to become him. I listened intently as I had always done, as I had done to Bowie. But now it was so much more intense. He was inside me, he was me, and I moved through the albums as he moved himself through me, filling me with life, lifting me with that voice. It was living in my head. It was my own voice. It was I, and it was me. I met up with Shu finally from the app, and we had some nice dates together in my local area. Simple dinners, beers and chatting. I told her I was David Bowie, and she was amazed, so very amazed. And she could see it, that I was him, that my voice was his. I didn't mention my I. It would be sad, too sad, not appropriate. Shu later came to my place. She seemed so lovely, making herself at home quite easily. Checking my things, tidying, moving things about. Much better like that, she said. I felt cared for. I would care for her too, perhaps. Was it long, she asked one day, since my girlfriend died? How did she know? And long, what is long when someone has died? What does a person mean when they ask that? I don't remember answering. A moment of gaucheness on her part. A mistake. Easy to do. She asked me about Bowie, my hobby. She called it that. She wanted to know if I was aware. Of what? The neighbours, she answered. How they mocked and laughed at me behind my back at the man who thinks he is David Bowie. I told her he had passed himself into me through his music. And you can be me. I sang it to her, and how I had felt this intense message through his eyes and his voice deep inside me, and how when I left, when she passed away, he wanted to protect me and wanted to carry on through me. The room filled with laughter. her destructive and immensely cruel laughter. Her stare was withering. I had misheard the lyrics. I had made them what I wanted them to be, and I was the purest fool. And you can be mean, she roared. After all, why would Bowie choose such a pathetic soul to share his existence with and his legacy? Why didn't I know that all the people around the town laughed at me? I had curled up on the floor. A neighbour was at the window. She must have heard the commotion. She looked concerned. Shu didn't see her. Shu took a pan from my small kitchen and hurled it at me. I was useless and embarrassing, and still in love with a dead girl. The door slammed. I could not look again to the window. Oh, what had my sweet neighbour heard and witnessed? What kind of guest had I had in my home? What weak man was I that I just lay snivelling into the tatami? There was a gentle knock at my door later. I must have slept. The old lady who had been at the window now called to come inside. I apologized and picked myself up and bid her come in. She had brought me supper, and quite without looking at me, chatted away about vegetables, all homegrown, and set the pot down in my kitchen. We all know how much you miss her. We miss I too, she said gently. She patted my shoulder and stepped away again and back outside. In the morning, things seemed odd, different. The sky was bright, unusually so, and there was a humming, and I realized it was from people. Tentatively, I put my head around the door. Someone called, "Are you dressed?" "Almost," I answered, and I stepped back in and grabbed my t-shirt. Outside, the street was lined with all my neighbours, all the small store and restaurant owners. They looked at me, and then they sang. And then they sang. And we can be heroes just for one day. Thank you, I love you. I'm not David Bowie, of course, but I'm going to be okay now, forever and ever. Thank you.